All right, so we have talked about ethos, pathos, and logos. This part should be reviewed. I'm just going to blast right through it. Okay? All three are helping you to establish your credibility, but in different ways. So it's really kind of targeting different parts of your audience for them to take you more seriously. Ethos, remember, is like appealing to their gut. Can they trust you? Do you know what you're talking about? Are you the right person to talk to me about this? Mm-hmm. Okay, that's ethos. Pathos is then appealing to their heart. Is this credible? Is this something I actually care about? Does it give me all the feels? All right. This is a really important thing to get people motivated. They want to make change. People want to make other people's lives better. And if we can kind of use pathos to dig into that, that's a good sign. Lastly, logos. All right. I could have all the feels and I might trust you, but still, like, in an effort to put your money where your mouth is, like, what are other people saying about this? How big is the problem? How important is this to address right now? If you've got some facts and figures, some statistics or data to help back up the fact that, like, no, seriously, like, don't just trust me on this. People at Yale or this organization or like this objective party have done research and they say like what I'm saying. Okay, so the logos appeals to your audience's brain. Okay, so now to do this, there are some kind of, we might call them rhetorical devices. So rhetoric deals with how people talk, how people speak. Okay. But there are some kind of like writing techniques that we can use to hammer these ideas home, to emphasize the importance, so that our writing is really helping be persuasive. It's not just our ideas. All right. The first thing that you could use in your letter to really emphasize the idea here is alliteration. And I trust you know what alliteration is. On your note sheet, I've given you just kind of a white half of that page to take any notes that you may want to in order to review. But alliteration means that you're starting words in succession, okay? So not maybe right next to one another, but in close order. Right over there. No, we are C launch. Oh. Yeah. Using, just right there, using the same sound. Okay, so for instance, I want this, wish for it, and wonder if it can be done. That, the musicality of the way that would read to your audience would kind of like deeper implant the idea in their brain. Okay, so that's why alliteration can be useful. Next, we've got an allusion. An allusion is kind of different. It's the fact that you're making a reference to something that is cultural, something that people don't need an explanation about. So for instance, for a state to make laws like these that segregate our communities while celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream is a joke. Now, you'll notice Dr. King doesn't need any explanation. That reference to that historical figure, people are going to understand what you're doing there. Also, I don't need to mention in his famous I Have a Dream speech delivered in 1960, like I don't need any of that stuff. Dr. King's dream is a reference that has enough cultural value that people just understand. And then, therefore, the way I use the reference to this dream, they also see the hypocrisy of how this decision to do this is flying right in the face of Dr. King's dream. All right, so an allusion is referring to something famous that doesn't need any explanation. So for instance, for those of you who are digging into topics related to the gun debate, okay, You don't need to explain what happened in Parkland, Florida. If you just drop Parkland in a paragraph, your audience is going to know what you're talking about because it applies to the topic that you're addressing. Does that make sense? Okay. So that's allusion. An analogy, okay, you've probably seen analogies in other ways. Maybe like to study vocabulary, for an example. But to use an analogy means that you presented your audience with a comparison. Okay? This is comparable to, or for instance, while Congress continues to debate the budget of addressing these diseases in Africa, malaria tightens its chokehold on the continent. So here, this analogy is comparing a disease, malaria, with someone strangling you. Okay, some deadly person. All right. Another one, like this, what you are doing is as irresponsible as leaving your car running and unattended in a shabby part of town. I don't know. Making that up. But creating a comparison that kind of sits, like they may not remember exactly what you say, but they might remember what you compared this to. And if you present it as a dire situation, you'd be in good shape. Parallel structure is different. In parallel structure, whereas other things may have been reviewed, parallel structure is probably something that is new to you. So what you're doing when two things are parallel, you could think about the fact that they're even, that they're could be equal, all right? Two parallel lines are never going to meet. They're kind of the same that way. So here, what you're creating parallelism in is the structure of the sentence. So the same type of word, if not the same word itself. For instance, one example of parallel structure that really also emphasizes repetition would be if I made reference to how she looks, how she talks, how she laughs. The repetition of how she in each new element of this sentence series presents a parallel structure. Presents like something that's easier to listen to, easier to understand as you read. Now, something totally different that's a little bit less repetitive, but very, very parallel, is the use of the word to and then a verb in this next one. To stand up for our rights, to protest injustice, and to demand fairness. That is our duty. Okay? Re-emphasizing with a similar structure of your actual sentence is what gives you that parallel effect. Okay, so that one's probably new. Lastly, repetition in general. Okay? Repeating the same word, maybe not right next to one another, but this is all an effort to really hammer home your idea. For instance, have you ever been like sleeping maybe in a new place or where like there's a clock ticking? The repetitive sound of that clock ticking becomes hard to ignore. Okay? Or if your faucet is dripping and you can hear it from your bedroom, that becomes like one of those things that's almost all you can hear after a while. The same effect exists with repetition with words. So this is from JFK's Man on the Moon speech. And this will be done in the decade of the 60s. It may be done while some of you are still here at school at this college and university. It will be done during the terms of office of some of the people who sit here on this platform, but it will be done, and it will be done before the end of this decade. So, interestingly enough, the word done, it's something your ear listens for, but it's not all you can hear. You hear like the other ideas here, but the repetition of the word done pops in a way that's really effective when you're an audience member. Okay? So, 2 of these devices are required in your letter. You can decide where and how to use them, for what ideas you'll present with them, but 2 are required. To get into A range, to show that you've really mastered the use of these, 3 different devices are going to be used in your letter. Okay, so hopefully you grabbed good notes. If you need to review, I am grabbing this right from our persuasive writing assignment on Canvas. So you can scroll down on the stuff that I've presented you and remind yourself, oh yeah, what's parallel structure again? Oh yeah. Okay, any questions about this? All right. So today, I'm going to be continuing to meet one-on-one to discuss your claims, to see how you can kind of like stroke the ego of your audience. All right. You are working to finish up your persuasive letter writing planner. Okay. Maybe looking for logos. And like I said when I introduced this, one really great fact could go a long way. No more than 2 statistics should be in your letter. So pick the perfect one or 2, and then really let that stand for you. All right. We talked about persuasive techniques, so now you can begin your persuasive letter by making your own copy of the document. What I think would be really smart is pulling open your Kwame Rose letter that we highlighted last week. All right, so that your body paragraph 1 is going to be mostly your ethos. Who are you to talk on this issue? And maybe a little bit of pathos. By the time paragraph 2 rolls around, I'm ready for some logos. Okay, and then maybe a little bit more pathos. By paragraph 3, you really want to hammer home the fact that, like, maybe I've got a little bit more logos, but I am one to be trusted. Okay, and if you can leave them with all the feels, work all 3 of them in there, you're in really great shape. Okay? All right, so at this juncture, you want to work like the wind so that any homework you have is really just putting yourself in a position to be in good shape to be able to use time tomorrow in class. Okay, because you're going to get more work time tomorrow in class. But on Monday, you're walking into class with 2 printed copies of this letter. Okay, so that's kind of where we're headed. And I'll remind you that there will be some more things to think about tomorrow, but that's where we're going. Okay?
A-lunch students should now be in 4th hour class.